The posthumous memoir of Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny has been released 8 months after he died in prison at the age of 47. Navalny originally began writing Patriot as an autobiography in 2020 after he was poisoned, an attack many blame Russian President Vladimir Putin for, but he has denied involvement. Before Navalny could finish the manuscript, he was arrested in Russia in 2021. Navalny was an anti-corruption activist, politician, and attorney who became a prominent figure in the Russian opposition movement after Putin was re-elected in 2012. Russian officials said Navalny died of natural causes, and U.S. intelligence earlier this year said Putin probably didn't order his death. Navalny's wife, Yulia Navalnaya, spoke to 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl about how she felt while reading her husband's memoir.
He said it was a doghouse. And this is the place where prisoners were sent to be tortured and raped and sometimes murdered. I wondered how you read those passages. I was thinking of you when I read it and thought, what is she feeling? How are you reading this?
It's a very tough moment for him to think about all these torturing places and torturing conditions, and about him, how he was laughing at these people even while he was there.
For more on this, let's bring in Alexandra Alter. She's a reporter for the New York Times who covers books. Alexandra, we have this book in front of us here. Such a fascinating, incredible read. What in there surprised you, if you can even sum it up?
Well, it's such an astonishing kind of document and piece of his legacy. But what really surprised me was to hear his voice and to see his personality and sense of humor still intact in these really horrific conditions in prison. He's such a charismatic public figure, but you really see him wrestling as a human with the fact that he's separated from his wife and children and probably will never see them again, that his entire, the cause that he's devoted his life to, Putin has imprisoned him and might end up silencing him. So it's really crushing in some ways, but it's also very inspiring. It's very funny. In one moment, he'll talk about these horrible work shifts that he's on, and the next minute, he'll joke and, make fun of the guards or talk about something funny that another inmate did. So it's astonishing to see somebody go through what he did and to remain cheerful and hopeful, really, about the future of Russia.
How do you think he was able to remain hopeful and have that humor, knowing he's going to miss his kids' graduation? He's not going to meet his grandchildren.
He talks about that in very frank terms and really wrestles with it. He says, sometimes he wants to scream, he wants to smash things. He's brought to tears at times, but he really, I think, loved what he did with his life and was willing to pay the ultimate price. And he knew when he went back to Russia that this was likely the outcome. He writes about that in the book, that decision to go from Berlin to Moscow, knowing that he would probably be arrested upon arriving, and thinking it's better for him to spend his life imprisoned in Russia, in his country, which he loved, with his fellow citizens, than as a leader in exile.
It's interesting because Yulia was asked that as well by Leslie Stahl, and her answer was basically, it wasn't for me to choose. He had made up his decision. There was no other decision. She had also told Leslie Stahl that he was able to essentially cleverly smuggle these journal entries out via court proceedings, and that there are diary entries from the first year of imprisonment, a little bit less in the second year, and then none from that third year. I mean, is that sort of indicative that the surveillance was becoming more intense? Is that indicative of his health degrading, or just fewer court appearances?
I think it's an indicative of how difficult it became for him to write in prison. He talks about only having a pen and paper for an hour sometimes, and then it became half an hour. We can assume it became less time. They were definitely cracking down on his communications. He had fewer phone calls with family. They were reading all of his correspondence. He writes about how some of the material was actually confiscated and never returned. And Yulia told me that after his death, they didn't receive any of his belongings. So it's possible that there was a good deal more writing that he would have had published if he could have. However, he was able to continue posting on social media until shortly before his death. So he was very sort of clever about getting his communications out and staying connected with his supporters.
What happens to his political movement now?
This is a great question. I mean, the Russian opposition movement, his death has been a huge setback. He was probably their most prominent leader, certainly globally. And now many members of his organization are in exile. Many Russian opposition leaders are trying to work from exile. And his wife, Yulia, now feels the responsibility to carry on his movement. And she feels the responsibility both as the person who loved Navalny, but also as a citizen of Russia who hopes to go back one day. And she told me, it's really difficult to lead an opposition movement from exile. That was exactly the reason that he wanted to return.
Alexandra Alter with the New York Times, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.